We have just a couple people here, so I'll entertain a motion to move up agenda item 6B, discussion on the potential SAFER grant application.
I'll make a motion to move up item 6B.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. Chief? Chief, I know we put this on the agenda last week when we set up the agenda, and as you can see, we have two members who are under the weather tonight and who aren't here. You're welcome to move forward with your discussion, and if you choose, you can just reach out to the other members, however you want to move forward.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, members of the board. I actually just confirmed with the town manager, I don't believe we were looking for any vote.
Right, but you want to move forward with
Yes.
the discussion, and then you can reach out to the other members if they have any questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Please go ahead.
So, thank you. So, as many of you know, for many, many years, I have been talking about trying to get our minimum staffing from 6 to 7 members on the group. I've made that request formally in my budget presentations every year since 2013, so for the past 6 years. And in this current fiscal year, working with town administration, we were able to make some movement on that, and we had 2 new career firefighters come on this past January. So currently, we have 2 groups at 9 and 2 groups at 8 members. The budget that you actually just voted to pass on to the Finance Committee has another career position. It's a half-year position starting in January, so that will get 3 of the groups up to 9. So again, this is a request that you've heard me talk about many times. We've been at a minimum staffing level of 6 for about 18 years. So what I'm presenting tonight for discussion with the board, I'll just pass this around. I apologize. I just finalized these numbers today. I think I got a couple extra copies for.
There you go.
Thank you.
Chief, if we can just have just a minute for
Absolutely.
members to review.
Yep.
Just let me know when you're ready to move on. Is everyone all set? Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So again, the town has began to make the commitment to hire the additional members by getting each group to 9, 2 in this fiscal year, 1 half-year position. So the expectation would be that in fiscal 21, whether it's a full year or half-year position, we would get that final position to get all of the groups to 9. So the SAFER grant, the Staffing for Adequate Firefighters for Emergency Response grant. The grant period, this is a federal program, opened on February 15th, and the closing date for the grant is March 22nd. So what I'm proposing is that we take the opportunity of the federal program to try to offset some of the costs that the town has made the commitment that they're going to do. So essentially, we're looking for 2 firefighters. One of those firefighters is already in the FY21 budget. But what I would propose is that we make a grant proposal for 2 firefighters. You can see starting on the top, the total salary over the 3-year grant period combined. You have the number there. Then the total estimated benefits gives us a total salary and benefits package over the 3 years of $557,967. So you can see under that, the federal government pays 75% of the total in year 1, 50% in year 2, 25% in year 3. So you can see just above that in the year 1, year 2, year 3 totals. And then underneath it would be what the town share would be, what the federal government share would be. So without the grant, again, the town is moving towards this commitment. So without the grant, the town would be responsible for the $557,967 over that 3-year period. But if we were successful in getting the grant award, it would save the town $275,145 over that 3-year period, making the town's total contribution of $282,821.39. So I guess in my mind, in speaking with the town manager, the CFO, this is something that we're making a move towards anyway. This is something that has been on town administration's priority list. So in my mind, it makes sense to at least apply for the federal funds to see if we can get some of these positions offset as a funding mechanism. I'd be happy to entertain any questions that the board has.
Mr. Holstrom.
Through the chair, these totals that you have here is salary and benefits, so the town will not be paying benefits? They'll only be paying, like say in the first year, will only be 25% of the benefits? Or will we, the town, have to absorb the benefits for all the employees? This is what I'm saying here right now is under the feds, it's 75%. 25% for the town, but year one total is $178,000. That's the salary plus the benefits, or are we just, is it just salaries we're talking about?
So if you look at, it says year one total, salary and benefits would be $178,447. So then underneath that, when you look at year one, the federal government would pay 75%, so their share of that 178 would be 133.8. And then the town share would be 44.6. And then, again, when you go back up, year two, total salary and benefits, you can see, and then underneath, it would give you, for each year, what the Fed share would be versus the town share.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Holstrom.
One of the concerns I had the last time we went through this, and it was for Aitman, I remember, from last year, and one of my concerns was the first 3 years, as you have here, we are at 25% in the third year from the feds, and in the fourth year, we're 100% by the town. That's a good chunk of change, salary and benefits. Is there a program to subsidize by the town budget? Is there a plan to pay for these new positions at the end of the 4 years?
So let me answer your first point first, and then I would defer to the CFO for the year 4 question. So last year when I came before the board seeking the SAFER grant application for 8 positions, we were in a little different boat then. At that time, I was still seeking to raise the minimum from 6 to 7, and we, at that time, had no budgeted positions to move forward. So I was seeking a total of 4 positions to get the groups from 8 to 9. And then I've identified in my long-term plan over the next 3 to 5 years, depending on department makeup, call statistics, some of those factors. So I think I addressed this year in my annual town report as well. But I've expressed to town administration that over the next 3 to 5 years, we have to look at a number of factors and figure out whether or not we may need to move the shifts from 9 to 10. Because what I don't want to see happen is have another 18-year period where our minimum staffing stays the same even though call volume is rising. So last year, my request was a grant for 4 positions to get us from 8 to 9. And then I was seeking an additional 4 positions to go from 9 to 10. But I'll be quite honest with you, and we mentioned this last year, that if we were successful in that grant award, we were going to have to come back, have a much more serious discussion about really what to do with those other 4 positions. But why my request is not 8 or 6, why it's 2, is because what's happened over the last year is that the town has made movement by 2 positions to get 2 of the groups to 9. So I'm not interested at this time in going from 9 to 10. That's in my 3 to 5 year plan to evaluate that as to whether or not that's a necessity. But the immediate need right now is to get the remaining 2 groups from 8 to 9. Again, one of those positions is already in the FY21 budget. But instead of asking just for one position from the federal government, we may as well ask for two, because if we can get them to assist us over the next 3 years for a position that's already budgeted, we'd be better served to do that. As far as the future years, I believe Mr. Kazanovich talked about this last year, but I would certainly turn to him about the future years.
Certainly, this is more palatable than the one that was presented to you last year. I had some concerns. We discussed that. In order to make a long-term commitment for 8 firefighters, the value of that set aside was much greater than it is here. So if you follow, and I like how this is laid out, year 2, although our share is $92,860, we already built in $44,000 as our share in year 1. So the net gain in year 2 is roughly $48,000, not $92,000. And subsequent to that, in year 3, although our share is $145,000, we would need another $52,000 in the budget to meet that obligation. In the final year, we need $49,000, close to $50,000. When the chief said that we made a commitment, he actually asked for 2 this year, and we ultimately agreed upon a 1 full-time with a start date of January 1. So we're trying to make this plan work without really tying the hands of other departments who have other needs as well. I think Steve and the deputy recognize that we're going to do this when we can, with no firm commitment that we would automatically add one next year. I think under this plan, the federal government helps ease that pain a little bit by infusing a reimbursement amount that the town doesn't have to come up with that money. So it gives us some flexibility to assume that full cost 100% of that one firefighter over 4 years, because the federal government is participating in a portion of that salary. So it makes it more manageable for us to do that. Certainly, I think once you accept the grant, you're committing to this funding schedule. We believe it's doable without putting a constraint on the town's finances. But certainly, it is an obligation that we would have to address up front first, and whether it be through tax levy or through any other funds that may become available.
Keep going.
Okay, sorry. I guess the word that you used was palatable, which tells me, you know what, we can do it, but should we be doing it? I guess a question for the chief through the chair. I want to be sure I understand how many men you have on a shift now. You're talking 8 to 9, but you're talking 7. What is, you've got, you're going to have the shifts, you're going to have 9 men if you go along with this program, but you're also talking about 7 men per shift. Is that not including your management?
No, that's the minimum. So currently there are...
That's what I want to understand.
Right. So currently, there are 8 full-time firefighters assigned per group. Let's go back to last year before there was an addition. So last year, there were 8 full-time firefighters per group. That has been the same shift staffing since 2006, with 8 members per group. With 8 members per group, we allow 2 members off due to vacation or personal days, paid time off, things like that. So our shift minimum is 6.
Okay.
This past January, we added 2 members to the department, so 2 groups are currently at 9. Okay. And then this 1 half-year position that is in the budget for this year will get 3 groups to 9, and then we still would need to get 1 more. So the goal is to get all 4 groups to 9 members, which by getting them to 9 members now ups our minimum shift staffing from 6 to 7, because we're still going to allow the same, 2 members off, but now the minimum staffing would be 7. So providing everybody's there, it's 9. So we could run in the course of a day anywhere from 7 to 9, depending on how many people are working. And that staffs 2 ambulances, a fire truck, And then the goal is that these positions will be assigned out West Street so we can maintain the West Street engine on a more consistent basis. Because right now, there's only 3 members at West Street. So when there's an ambulance call, it leaves 1 member there. This member would allow us to at least keep 2 people on an engine at the West Street station.
Okay. My question, I guess, is, it sounds like the town is committed to this, one way or another. I don't know how you can commit money that hasn't been, budgeted or been through the Finance Committee, but I guess my question is, how's the staffing, how do you figure on the staffing? Is there a recommendation? Is there a requirement? Is there a standard? What is there that tells you you have to have 9 men on a shift? With the 6 men, I know you're talking about 6 men minimum, but if you're talking about 9 men, now you can have that extra 1 if 2 people are out, so you'll have 7. What's the staffing requirements, recommendations, guidelines, standards? What?
That's a lengthy conversation. I don't know if we want to really talk about what the staffing requirements are, because the number is going to be much higher than 9. But the number is based on the actual activity that goes on within the community. I reported in the annual town report this year, our call volume's consistently been growing anywhere between 2 and 3% a year over the last several years. We had a 3.61% increase from 2017 to 2018. Within the next couple of years, we'll be pushing 4,000 emergency calls. When I got here in 2006, we were hovering somewhere around the 2,800 mark. So we've seen a substantial amount of call volume growth within the department. It's really, in my mind, I guess it's simple math. We operate 2 staffed fire stations with 2 paramedic level ambulances. So if we are at our minimum of 6 people, take 4 right out of the gate just to staff ambulances, that leaves 1 2-person engine company, which in my mind is, well, not just in my mind, a 2-person engine company is not safe staffing on an engine company. I'm trying to get that to 3. I'm trying to get 3 people on an engine company. So by having a shift minimum of 7, that allows us to staff 2 paramedic level ambulances and 1 3-person engine company. If we have a shift staffing of 9, it would be 6 members at headquarters to staff an ambulance, 5 members at headquarters to staff an ambulance and a 3-person engine, and 4 people out at West Street to staff an ambulance and a 2-person engine. So it's not really a magic formula. The town operates 2 staffed fire stations. So in order to staff 2 ambulances and 1 3-person engine and 1 2-person engine, the number is 9. So providing that we are at full staff at 9, we can do that. But on the days when we're at 7, then we're not going to be able to staff completely that engine out at West Street. So we're relying just on the single 3-person engine out of headquarters, which is why it's more important that we have the 3rd person on that engine if that's the only engine that's available.
Okay, thank you.
Through the chair, if I can address the issue, just to clarify, town administration didn't commit, we can't commit to the finances until it goes to the finance committee and town meeting.
Word in between,
we
so.
committed to a plan to address the staffing issue that the fire chief has explained to us. So we have made it very clear to the finance committee the last 2 years that one of our priorities was public safety, and that specifically it was the fire department. So for the last 2 years, we've said that to the finance committee. They have told us to come in with a plan for what we need based on what the chief's recommendation is for the minimum manning and the staffing and the call volume. So we have committed to finding a plan and developing a plan to ultimately get us there. In no means could we commit to doing that without any votes. We have had the votes. So town meeting and finance committee both approved the staffing levels that we put in for the last 2 years. We have, again, in this particular budget coming up, 1 additional staff person. We can't always meet the requests of the department heads, including the chief, and he'd be the first to tell you he has come before us with requests that we've had to say no to, but we are saying that we are doing our best to get him to where he needs to be, but it has to be a long-term commitment. It has to be a long-term plan. It can't be done in 1 fiscal year. It couldn't be done in 3 fiscal years. So our commitment to him was to look at putting positions in the budget over a long-term plan of 3 to 5 years to ultimately get him to that staffing of 9.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, just one more comment. I'm just looking at some quick stats here. Just over the past 8 years, in 2010, the department did 2,991 calls. We finished 2018 with 3,768. So we've seen significant call growth, but we haven't seen a change in our minimum staffing in that same time period. In 2018, our back-to-back calls, which what we classify within the department as back-to-back, is when one emergency call comes in, within 20 minutes of that emergency call, either a second or a third emergency call comes in. In 2018, 35.47% of our emergency calls, so a little over 1,300 calls, were classified in that back-to-back call volume. That's very difficult to do with 6 people. It's very difficult to do when you have 2 ambulances already on calls, and now you have a single engine company with 2 people trying to respond to multiple other emergencies. One person doesn't sound like a lot, but to be able to have that one supervisor or paramedic in a car that's able to answer those other back-to-back calls, that's big. Or to be able to have that third person on the engine company. So that's all.
Chief, I have a couple questions for you, and I'm glad you just mentioned that. You know, and I appreciate the information you put out on Facebook. Now, I think it was yesterday, it was in the recent days, might have even been today, you had a call where you said that they requested the second ambulance. So now you have the 2 ambulances tied up at one accident scene. Do you immediately alert for backup ambulance when that happens?
No, it's on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
Typically, what would happen is if both of our ambulances are tied up, we don't call in an ambulance for mutual aid coverage. We would just handle those requests as the medicals were coming in. So there is a little bit of a delay on those ambulances, which is why it's important to have staffing to make sure that we're responding on a first responder level.
Yeah, no, it certainly seems that the call volume is higher than it was.
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt.
I have a couple questions on, and you can just refresh my memory, because I know we talked about it a year ago. Talk a little bit about the process and the actual grant, federal money. Is it a more competitive grant?
It is. It's a nationwide competitive grant. So the application, I'm going to be appearing before the Finance Committee this Wednesday, and then I believe I'm going to be back here on March 11th, I believe, which is your next meeting.
Next meeting is March 11th.
For a vote, either to support or not support applying for the grant. So it is a nationwide competitive grant. Again, just to Mr. Holstrom's point earlier, one of the reasons that I was interested in going for the 8, and this was a topic of discussion last year, one of the reasons that I was going for the 8 was because if we're not successful in the grant, which we weren't, but we're able to get feedback as to where we fell short within the grant application. So that, again, that was another reason why I sort of wanted to go for the 8, even if we turned down the other 4 positions. I just wanted to see where we set sort of nationwide competitively in terms of a rating or a grade on the application. So we were able to get some good feedback from the last grant process. I mean, there's no promises that we'll get it this time. There's a lot of departments that put in for it. But I think we got some good feedback on where the shortfalls of the last application were.
Did you have anything?
I just had a few generic questions about the grant.
Sure.
About how many are available for departments across the country for the specific one?
So the federal government approves, and I don't have it in front of me, but they approve a pool of money, and then it's divided up really based on request. So we could submit for 2 positions, and let's say they approve the town of Auburn, they'll take the 557, and then that just sort of deducts from the bottom. There is no set number of departments that they set out to fund. It's really when the money dries up. So they look at each individual application and each individual need of the department, and they rank them, and then they start with the highest priority to the lowest priority, and that's how they award the grants. So they don't set out in the course of a year to say, we're going to fund 200 fire departments. They may only fund 100, depending on what the needs were in the request. So, for example, the town of Dudley got 1 position last year, but there were other departments that got 20 positions. So you really don't know sort of what's going to come in from around the country and what the need level is.
Is there potential for them to just approve 1 if we applied for 2 positions? Can they change it?
So they could. We could submit for 2, and then we could get a phone call, and they could say, we would like to make you an offer, we'll modify your grant, we can give you 1 position or 2, and then that's something we would have to come back here and discuss as to whether or not that's something that they would want to entertain. But yes, they can modify our request if they don't have enough money to fund it.
Yeah, those were the only questions I had. I know every time I talk to you, you talk about how the last year was the highest call volume that you've had, so I know it's a running.
It seems like I get to say that every year now for the past 7, so.
Do we have anything else on this? Thank you, Chief.
All right, thank you very much.
I hope you'll outreach our 2 members. Obviously, they can't discuss it with other members of the board, but
Yes, I certainly can.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. Have a great night.